So, my friend Luke Curtini in Golf Magazine wrote an article, you can find it on golf.com right here. 3 differences between pros and AMs at impact. So what he really did was took some of our swing true data and tied it up into a neat little package about how to move when you hit the ball. What do you think
Makes
about
sense.
that? Great idea, right? He's a genius. Absolutely. So here's what they are. The first one, hip shift is what he defined it as. Patrick, you want to demonstrate hip sway as we know it? Yeah, There you go. So you can either move your hip sway towards the target or away. I actually like the shift term a little bit. He should be a writer and do that professionally. The next one is shoulder tilt. Can you demonstrate that one? Yep, to the right, and then you have to the left. Yeah, you got it. Okay, so you got some hip shift and some shoulder tilt at impact. So demonstrate what you'd want at impact with both of those.
Yeah, so you'd want your hips to be pushing towards the target, and then your shoulders to be tilted down to the right, or with your right shoulder down to the ground.
I said demonstrate it, not talk about it, but okay. So the hip sway as we measure it is, you all right?
Yeah.
It's about 1.6 inches more towards the target with his tailbone than it was at address. Then his shoulders are tilted 39 to the right, as he so eloquently put it. That's because his shoulder shift or sway is actually almost an inch further away than where it started. So those two comboed together, the shift and the tilt, is really starting to give you a way to have the club ascend. So I think that was a really nice way to explain that. That helps you do a host of other things too, like keep the swing direction moving more into out, but excellent demonstration. The last one though was the hip turn. So if you do the hip shift and you do the shoulder tilt, it's really hard. I know you're not quite looking at it from the angle I am here, but it's hard for Patrick not to actually have his hips open or turning open, as you know so many great players actually want to do when they hit a shot too. That helps combine the in-to-out swing direction that you have with the shoulder tilt and start to straighten that out some. That starts to become so much more important when you're a really skilled golfer, like the best players on the PGA Tour who hook too much or hit big pushes with their driver. That turning piece is so critical to them. But what do you think about turning more if you're an amateur golfer that slices all the time?
Yeah, if you're slicing all the time, the last thing you want to do is try to turn more, because it's only going to exaggerate the problem.
Yeah, so demo that one, like hit towards the corner of the screen there so you can see this right down the line. Yeah, that's perfect. So if you're, go to like 6.5, so if the shaft is too far out away from you at this point in time, you're ready to actually slice across the ball. By turning more, Patrick's really just describing the rest of the problem. So from here, if he keeps turning his hips and shoulders more and more and more, the path of the club just moves more across or out to in, and the slicing just becomes more of a problem. Often though, you hear on, you might watch lessons on the internet, or you hear a golf TV commentator talk about how getting open is so critically important. It is. But it is when you have a swing direction that's programmed in before you hit the ball, like demonstrated at 6 or so, when the shaft's parallel to the ground in the downswing. When you have the shaft inward behind you enough, as opposed to how he demonstrated before, go ahead and push it out this way. So if you have the shaft inward as opposed to out here, turning becomes so much more significant and useful, because that's making you swing straight into the ball. But those 3 things, when you combine them together, were really the biggest impact separators of skill for the swing true study that we have.
Yep.
Sound good? You think we got most of that?
I think so.
Okay.
We're doing okay.
All right, so Luke wrote the article. He did a good job. He figured out those 3 things and just tied them all together. So here's the separator of skill though. In all 3 of those, the hip shift or sway as we're defining it, shoulder tilt, and hip turn, there is a direct correlation, and it's a strong one, between good players and bad players in the amount that you have. So the best players do all 3 of those things the most, all of them. The worst do all 3 the least.
Yep.
So demo, you did a good job. Just keep facing that way and do all 3 of them really well. So you've got some hip shift, you have the shoulder tilt to the right, and when we're defining that, it's really just the difference between his, just stay there at impact. His shoulders are tilted on an angle about 39 degrees from his left to his right, and his hips are open somewhere in the mid-30s at this point in time. Now demo the worst players. So they have the least amount of sway towards the target. You can see how his hips are further away, go all the way down to impact. His shoulders aren't really tilted at all, they're almost level to the ground, and he's barely turned his hips at all. So there's a little conundrum in there though, because you just said don't try to turn more. I just said the best players are turned the most. Can you kind of reconcile what a bad player, or bad is the relative term, I'm using a slicing.
Yeah.
What a slicer would want to do, you'd want to get 2 of those things right first.
Yeah. Yep. If you're slicing, the first 2 to get right are the hip shift and then the shoulder tilt. That way you're going to shift your swing direction a little bit more in and out. That's the beginning part. Once you get that, then it's the third ingredient that he's adding into this, which is a turn piece.
You got it. So just set up as though you're going to hit one straight here.
Okay.
So a pool noodle on the ground is always a good way to help you practice not slicing. If you hit it, you've done enough damage to know that your swing direction was too far out. So what I would practice if I were Patrick, trying to make sure you never hit this, the best way to do it would be close your hips, do the hip sway the most towards the target, the shift, and tilt your shoulders the most to the right. It'd be really hard for him to have the sweet spot of the club on this side of the noodle and hit across the ball that way.
Yeah.
Then when that was easy, to Patrick's point, then I'd practice the last part, which is the turning, which keeps the swing direction from moving in and out too many degrees. Good?
Sounds
Okay,
good.
So how do you do that? So the formula I would subscribe
Okay.
to, or prescribe, if you want
Yeah.
to say it that way, is think of it as like 1 + 1 + 1 equals those 3. So start by doing just 1 at a time. So go ahead and set up to this one.
Okay.
And then on this particular swing, let's just practice the hip sway piece.
Okay.
So even if you slice though, I'd still keep the pool noodle here, even if you're just practicing one of those things. So start in this one, just at address like you do normally.
Yep.
And when you hit this ball, we'll record this swing. I want to show that your hip sway is about as far forward as you can get
Gotcha.
it toward the
Okay.
target. So that was lesson number 1 of Luke's, was do the hip sway piece.
Okay, ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready? Pretty good. So let's take a look at that one. And we'll use just a couple of lines on here because it's really easy to see in this camera. We start with Patrick's lead leg right here on the right-hand picture. We'll start just right there at address, and then let's work our way down to impact. Now notice how in that same picture, right here, how much further his lead hip has moved than where it started. If you think you struggle with the hip shift piece, which was spot number 1 on Luke's formula, that would be a good way to do it. Now I'm looking at both of those pictures too, and because
Yeah.
you've done the hip sway, I'll change this color, make it a little bit brighter, go yellow here. Your shoulders are actually tilted probably pretty close to that 39 degrees. So that
Pretty
is
much.
the recipe is to do the part 2, you've got to do part 1 really well.
Yep.
If for some reason you hit a shot and you could have your friend film this, or you just set up your camera phone on your couch as you make these practice swings in your living room, we'll talk about how to do this at home in a second, and you saw that your shoulders weren't tilted enough, that would be step number 2, would be hit a shot, and on this next one, even if you hit way behind the ball,
Yeah.
just make sure your shoulders are tilted enough.
Yep.
You want to try one just to show
Sure.
people how extreme this is?
Okay.
Mainly because I don't think people practice doing things extreme enough, so it takes way too long to actually change your swing, so just the shoulder tilt. Okay. Now we're going to test you. Okay.
How'd I do?
Good shot. We're going to find out. So I have
Good.
this yellow line up. This is from your previous swing. And I had mentioned in this one, just try to tilt your shoulder as much as you could. Probably should have told you do it even more so you hit way behind the ball. But let's take a look at this one.
Ah,
Right
somewhere in
about
there.
impact. Similar. Probably more close to this red line. Red arrow.
Yeah.
A little more.
I've been practicing trying not to do that too much, so
I know, that's
but
a
that doesn't
different one
pertain
for
to a
you.
lot of people watching this.
Yes, quite opposite. If you wanted to make sure you stop hooking, your pro
Yep.
tip would be straighten your right arm faster, have less shoulder tilt for another day. So then the last one is the hip turn. So you've got more hip shift, you have more of the shoulder tilt, and then here's how you'd practice your hip turn. Go ahead and set up to this one.
Okay.
And I don't know how you'd describe it, but I'm just thinking out loud on this one. I would actually start with my hips 30 degrees open.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe even straighten out your right foot a touch more. Don't turn it as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just start hit this shot, and your goal is excessive amount of hip turn. So
Okay.
think
Yep.
like
Trying to
Dustin
get back to it,
Johnson.
or if go more.
Yeah, or go more. So who
Okay.
cares if you hit the pool noodle? Just turn as much as you can. You didn't hit me. That's really nice. And let's take a look at that one. So you can see even from this front view, I'll do a quick little zoom over here. Patrick's hips are open to the target, and I'm using just the idea that from his right knee to his left, it's a 2D picture, but if I started connecting those in 3 dimensions, this ain't pretty
Yeah.
far this way, not at his target, which is straight ahead. You can see a lot more of his right knee relative to the back of his left. So he's preset the amount that you've got your hips turned. It's a good way to start.
Yep.
I'm still saying this is not for anyone who has any sort of directional challenge to the right. You laughed. Did I cover that enough?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Disclaimer,
It really
100.
is. Okay, so you can practice each one of those, just one by one by one. Don't try to do more than one because this is a little complicated.
Yep.
And the goal with your practice is to be able to change your motor program quickly and a lot. So you don't have to practice the exact same thing for months, years, decades.
Well, if you're trying all three of them at one time too, you never really know which one you got right or wrong.
That's fair enough. Let's take a look at these shots too, just for fun. So we've got 3 different shots up here. You've got the 2 white ones that are demonstrated up here. I'll use this arrow just to help curve. So this was the shot of the most sway. Really high push and a draw. This is the shot with the most tilt. Really high, not quite as high, and it drew just a little bit. And then here is your maximum hip turn shot. I know you mishit that,
Yep.
but to get a ball flight that pulls and cuts just a little bit towards the flag is telling you that your swing direction was much straighter than those previous 3. That is why that is such a significant thing that we'll disclaim one more time. If you slice, don't bother with hip turn. Fair enough?
Yep, fair enough.
Okay, so another way that you could do this at home, throw the club down on the ground, and you could actually do the whole thing without a club. I think the people who struggle the
want me to
most
set
with
it?
all of these things, no, I don't care what you do that. Just,
Oh.
You did a great job. Put it on the ground.
Okay.
That'll work. So the people who struggle with this the most can do this just by moving your arms around. The minute you start putting the club in the ground in your hands, if you're already not very familiar with what to do, it starts getting more
Yeah.
complicated. So I think you can do a ton of this practice just at home. So the first one could be like your hips, hip shift, as Luke explained it.
Yeah.
You could stand with your hips up against like the edge of a couch or a chair and practice making a swing with just your arms, where you make a backswing and then on the downswing shift into it and keep going. That would be a great way to do it.
Yep.
Same thing works for your shoulder tilt, because you saw how those 2 ingredients really come together to form the amount that you tilt to the right. Good luck tilting to the right without enough hip sway towards the target. Then good luck having a swing direction and an angle of attack that's near the tour average if you don't have enough hip sway and shoulder tilt. That's why those are so critical to the whole puzzle. That is what makes the club stop going downward and start going upward. If you're going to hit a shot with a minimal amount of hip sway and your shoulders very level to the ground, you're really at a conundrum of how you're going to make the club go upward.
Yeah.
That's why it just doesn't work that way, even though sometimes that's a popular theory. And I think a lot of those theories just come from an inability to be able to measure swings on a mass scale like we do. So
Yep.
GOLFTEC coaches are given tons of lessons because they're good at it, and then we collect all that data about what happens in those swings, and you can see key separators very quickly. So you could always start out with a club, do one piece at a time, then ultimately you're trying to wrap all those together and just hit a good shot.
Yeah.
You want to do one? You
Sure.
think you can do it?
Yeah.
Do you need this here so you don't slice?
I don't think I
Think
think
you're
I
okay
got
with
this.
that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
So
Okay,
I'm
you got
looking
that
for
swing?
my shoe always trips this one. All right, so let's put those all
Put
together.
all
So
those
Patrick's
together?
going to have some element of hip sway or shift towards the target. Shoulders are tilted to the right, and then his hips are turned enough where he hits a push. That one curved a little too much,
Yeah.
but he's hitting a 7-iron, 188 yards, which is about 10 yards over the green. Sorry, I put you in the wrong spot.
It's all right.
Okay, so that's how you can take the short story from Luke and turn that into a longer story. Unfortunately, we don't always have the environment to actually tell a long form story. We have to do it in these short little buckets.
Okay.
But that's why we're doing this content too. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know it will solve your impact position problems, or at least give you some good insight into how you can help yourself. If you did enjoy it, go ahead and click the thumbs up button right now, and don't forget to join the GOLFTEC community for exclusive content, offers, and to book a lesson or a fitting. Check out the link below to create a free GOLFTEC account.